Alright, so I want to do a lecture on synthetic division, but more than just synthetic division, I want to do it on why synthetic division is. Synthetic division has a horrible problem among students, is that they love it in class, and then they get to the test and it's left blank. And so what my theory is as to why that happens, is synthetic division actually is too easy. I think that's students' problem with it. And normally we don't have that problem with math, right? Synthetic division, all you're going to do is you're going to end up multiplying, then adding, then multiplying, then adding, then multiplying, then adding. And then read your answer. To be pretty much all synthetic division is. And the problem with that is because multiplication is relatively easy and addition is relatively easy, students don't feel the need to put that much time and effort into practicing synthetic division. Because who's going to forget how to multiply and how to add? And so then we get to the test, and we get to the synthetic division, and all we can remember is, that was really easy. It was multiplying and it was adding, and there was no way I could have ever forgotten it. But how the heck do I do synthetic division? What do I multiply? What do I add? And we forget how to set it up. We forget what to multiply. We forget what to add. Guys, please make sure synthetic division gets just as much practice as the other ones, because it's going to save you a ton of time. But if you don't know how to do it well, it's going to really cripple our grades. Okay? So what I'm going to do to introduce this concept of synthetic division, I want to start with long division. Because long division and synthetic division are essentially the same thing. And if you can see where it comes from, you're much more likely to understand it. Plus, there are going to be certain cases you don't have a choice. You have to use long division. Synthetic will not work in every case. So, for long division, you're going to put the first one inside your division house. 4x cubed minus 3x squared plus x plus 7. The second one is going to go outside up front, and it's minus 2. Okay? Now one thing you have to be very careful in both synthetic and long division is you've got to pay attention to your exponents. So I want you to watch here. Your highest exponent is 3. The next term over has to be 1 less. So it goes 3, 2, 1, 0. If you were missing an exponent, say we did not have an x, it was just 4x cubed minus 3x squared plus 7. It's not going to work unless you put something in there. So we're going to talk about placeholders in a different video. I'm going to do another video on synthetic division where it's missing pieces, and I'll show you how to do that. So there will be an additional video, if not a couple of additional videos. Okay? So for long division, I have an acronym. Does McDonald's serve burgers? That's my acronym. And what the D is, it's divide. Divide the first term inside by the first term outside. First term inside by first term outside. So over here, my first term inside is 4x cubed. Divided by first term outside, plain old x. 4x cubed divided by x, that would be 4x squared. So 4x squared is going to come up here. You could put it first or you could line it up. Some people really like them lined up above the exponents. It really doesn't matter because your answer is not its placement. Your answer is going to be the entire top. So it doesn't matter where you put it, but a lot of people just like to have things lined up nice and pretty. It's a good habit to keep in long division. It's a good habit to keep in math in general, is to have things organized nice and prettily. It's going to make your life a little bit simpler. Okay? So that's step 1. Your answer goes on top. Okay? If I was in a lecture with students, I would have written answer goes on top just to make sure. So y'all might want to write that down if you're taking notes. Step 2 is M. M is going to be multiply. My hint there is to make sure you distribute. So we have 4x squared times x minus 2. 4x squared times x is 4x cubed. 4x squared times negative 2 is negative 8x squared. This answer, what I would normally write for a lecture course if I had students in front of me, goes down below. It's going to go at the bottom. We have 4x cubed minus 8x squared. Now, long division gives a lot of people problems. Probably because it's long, probably because it's a process that we've just got to learn how to do, and it takes a lot of practice to do long division. A lot of people try to skip this math that I'm writing over here, and they try to do from here to there and here to there. That's fine if you're really good at math. It's okay to skip things and not write everything down if you're really good at math. But a lot of people are not really good at math. And if you've always struggled with math, maybe it's time to start writing everything down. So I always write my notes down to the side. If I had a little bit more room, if I could use my entire board instead of just half my board, I would have it a little bit more organized over to the side so that I could show all my work. If I write this out on paper, my division may only take this long, but my notes and my steps may take that long because I'm going to write out every division, every multiplication. I'm going to write it all out. It makes sure you don't forget things. As you're looking over here, there's a lot going on. It's easy to overlook something because you're overlooking all this stuff anyway, so it's easy to overlook an extra piece. Over here, you're focused on the initial step, and you're not focused on the entire thing as a whole. It makes it a whole lot easier not to forget things. Okay, so that went down below. Step number 3, subtract each column. And so I do this a little bit differently than others. Subtract each column, I put an extra little minus sign because I want to show the subtraction in green. You don't show the subtraction, it's not going to work. I don't know how well y'all can see my color coding, but I try to do divide in purple, multiply in blue, subtract is in green. So I want to be able to see that color. That way I can say 4x cubed minus 4x cubed. That should go away. Every single time the first one should go away. Because the whole reason we did it was we did 4x cubed divided by x to get this one. And then we did this times that. It should come out to the same thing. We divided and then we remultiplied it back together. So it should always cancel out the first one. Second column, negative 3x squared minus negative 8x. Double negative makes a positive. Negative 3x squared plus 8x squared, 5x squared. Make sure you do not change exponents when adding or subtracting. This whole column has x squareds in it all the way down. Always have x squareds. So if we're keeping things lined up, it makes it a little bit easier to make sure things aren't getting completely messed up. And the last step before we start over is bring down and repeat. And the reason I emphasize that and, I put it all caps and I underlined it, is because if you bring down, you have no choice. You have to repeat. If you cannot bring down, then you cannot repeat, and so you're done. So I emphasize that and is a both. So I'm going to bring down plus x. Bring down the next term. You can bring down all of the rest if you want. I've seen some students prefer to just keep it all coming down. But the majority of explanations tend to bring it down one at a time. That way, just like we are over here when we're doing the math, we're focused on just the problem and just the step. We're not focused on the entire thing. We're focused on just a little bit because it's easier for our brains to wrap our heads around just a little bit than it is an entire process. So that's why I want to emphasize writing your steps down. So I'm going to erase these so that I can write new steps down for the next repeating. So we are repeating. Step 1 is divide. Our first inside, we're going to the bottommost inside. So 5x squared divided by our first outside. That hasn't changed. That's just x. 5x squared divided by x would be 5x. That's going to go on top. Now we do have to be very careful with the top. Our answer needs to be a polynomial. So we've got to make sure every piece is its own term. If those were to be multiplied together, that makes them one term. That does not make 5x its own term. So you need to make sure these are separated by either a plus sign or a minus sign. And that's going to depend on what this came out to. Our first was positive, a positive divided by a positive is still a positive. That needs to be a positive. If you have a negative sign in here, make sure it gets transcribed over here as a negative. That way it follows into soup. Okay? Next, we're going to multiply. You are only multiplying this step over here. You are not multiplying the 4x squared. We've already multiplied that. So that's why if you're writing your math down over here, you're focused on just this one step. You're not focused on the entire problem as a whole. Just 5x times the outside. So we're going to have 5x, always the piece from step 1, times x minus 2. 5x times x, 5x squared, 5x times negative 2 is negative 10x. And you get surprised how many students get extremely frustrated with me. They're like, your steps aren't working, I'm writing out everything. And then I go look at their notes and they're writing out all this, but they're not writing out all that. And as soon as I force them to write this out, they're not making mistakes. So I cannot emphasize how important it is to write things down. Okay? Step 3, subtract each column. Add an extra subtraction sign for the step. 5x squared minus 5x squared, it should always go away. If it didn't, you did your division wrong, or you distributed wrong, one or the other. Positive x minus negative 10x. Double negative is a positive. Comes out to 11x. Remember, this entire column should just be x's. So that's my subtract. Next, break down and, that is an N. Sorry, I can't spell apparently. Bring down and repeat. If I bring down, I do have a 7 to bring down. If I bring down, I must repeat. But notice there's nothing after the 7, so this will be my last going through the process. The longer it is, the more repeats you're going to have to do. By doing the larger ones, you learn this process a whole lot better than the shorter ones. If you only do something that has a 3x squared, you're not going to learn long division very well. If your x squared is your highest exponent, you're not going to learn long division very well. If you do the x cubed or an x to the 4th is your highest exponent, you have to do half the number of problems to get the process down. The higher the exponents you put, the less problems you're going to have to do to memorize this process, because it gives you more practice with that repeat. Okay, so we're repeating, so I'm going to erase my steps. If I was on paper, I wouldn't, but I only have so much room on the board. First inside, that's the very bottom one. 11x divided by first outside, x. 11x divided by 11, or I'm sorry, can't read it right at the same time. Can't talk and write at the same time. 11x divided by x is 11. That is a positive, so it's going to go up top. Positive 11. 11, we're going to multiply. 11 times x minus 2, that's 11x minus 22. That goes at the bottom. Subtract each column. 11x minus 11x. 7 minus a negative 22, double negative. 7 plus 22 is 29. Can we bring down? No. So at this moment, we are done with the long division process. Now some classes, depending on what your teacher does, will teach you to put this as a fraction. Some will teach you to just say it's a remainder, different things. Since we're focused on synthetic division as well, your answer is 4x squared plus 5x plus 11 with a remainder of 29. So this is going to be your remainder. Okay? So that is long division. So now I'm going to erase the directions. I'm going to leave the problem up, but I'm going to erase the directions so I have room to put the synthetic. And what we're going to do with synthetic is we are pretty much going to just get rid of all the variables. And that's why it's very important that you have every type of variable. So if you're starting with an x cubed, you have to have an x squared, an x, and a constant. If you're starting with x to the 5th, you have to have an x to the 4th, x cubed, x squared, x, and a constant. You've got to have every single one. Otherwise, how could we tell which one it is without the variables there? So what we're going to do is synthetic. When I teach this in lecture, I'm very picky in how I have them organize it the first few times. I tell them between their problem, go down 2 lines on your notebook paper and draw a line as long as your problem. Then I tell them skip down 2 more lines and draw another line. So you should have a blue line on your notebook paper between these 2 dark lines. Okay? And then go over, about 5 or 6 inches, 4 or 5 inches. It only needs to be a little bit. And do a vertical line that goes through them both and past. It only has to be about, like we put 1 line here, and I tell them to put 2 lines there. So these little lighter lines are your notebook paper. So that way you have 2 dark lines horizontal and 1 vertical. That's part of setting it up. If you can't get this, and you can't remember to set it up like this, you are not going to remember how synthetic division works. At all, period. You've got to get this set up first. Then, you're going to do your inside. Remember the first one went inside? Your first one's still going to go inside, but it's going to be at the very top. Just like here, it was up toward the top. This one's going to be kind of upside down. You're going to have the inside original equation. All of this work is actually going to end up being in the middle, and your answer is going to end up being at the very bottom. So it's kind of upside down, but it works really well. All you're going to do is, we don't want any variables in synthetic. So you're going to start with your highest exponent, and all you're going to write down is the coefficient. So it is 4. Leave a space to show that it's a different number. Your second coefficient is not 3, it's -3. Leave a space, your third coefficient. Leave a space, and your last. This should be your x cubed, x squared, x, and your constant. Again, you cannot be missing one. If you're missing one, you put a 0 in its place. Then, over here, for part of our setup again, here you want to do what's being divided. But you want it to be x equals. It's being divided by x minus 2, right? We don't want x minus 2. We want x equals. So say it's x minus 2, put it over here. X minus 2 equals 0. X would equal positive 2. Because we would add 2, add 2. So that's what we're going to put over here. Then, so all that's just your setup. We haven't actually done any math yet. That is all set up. So this is one of the things the students forget. They get focused on the actual math, and they're like, oh, add multiply, that's fine. And then they get to the test, and they're like, I know I added and multiplied, but I don't know how to get to there. You've got to get it set up first. Okay. And once you get really good at synthetic, you don't have to leave as many lines. I leave a ton of lines just to help explain what's going on. I show a lot of work. Story of my life, I show a lot of work. The very first thing you're going to do, the first one, you're going to drop it all the way down to the very last line. All the time, no matter what. All the way down to the very last line. Now the only way this works is if the degree right here is 1 and there's no number, no coefficient. Degree must be 1. So that's the first thing we're going to do. So I'm going to go through this all, and then I'm going to explain how it relates to the log division. Next step, you're going to multiply. Very bottom by the outside. So I'm going to do 4 times 2. That gives me 8. Okay. Next step, it seems very random. That's okay. Next step is you're going to add plus 8. That gives us 5. And then we multiply again, bottom by outside. 5 times 2, that's 10. Add top to middle. 1 plus 10, that's 11. Multiply again. 11 times 2, 22. 7 plus 22 is 29. That is the synthetic division. You bring down, you multiply, you add, you multiply, you add, you multiply, you add. Then we've got to figure out how to read our answer out of here. So before I get quite to there, I want you to see the similarities. So the first thing we did was drop the 4, right? What is our first answer up here? Our first term at the top is 4x squared. Where did that 4 come from? It was the first one divided by just an x. If there's no number here, there's nothing to change that 4. So that's why it always drops. That's why you only want to do this process if the coefficient is 1 and the degree is 1. So the highest exponent and the coefficient and the divisor need to be 1. That just falls. So this is where the first one came from. Came from that divide step. Then we multiplied 4 times 2, right? That was when you distributed. 4 times 2, 8 gave us negative 8. But we got positive 8. Did we do something wrong? Because it came out with negative. But we're not subtracting either, are we? We're adding. So notice once you subtract, what happens to that 8? It became positive. So because we changed it to x equals instead of x minus 2, became x equals positive 2, that undid all the subtraction for us so that all we had to do was add. So that's where the 8 came from. Once we added negative 3 and 8, that was this addition that went right here. That gave us the 5. Then we did our division, so that's what put it up here. That's how this one became up here, because it was divided by 1. We multiplied 5 times negative 2, which gave us a negative, but then because we're not multiplying by negative 2, we're multiplying by positive, it automatically came out 10, so on and so forth. So if we look at our answer, we have the 4x squared, we have a positive 5x, and we have an 11. What about that 29? I didn't have a 29 up here. I had a 29 down here. So with synthetic, it's going to give you every piece. So the trick you have to remember is this very last one is always your remainder. Now the word remainder starts with an R, so we call that R of x. R of x is 29. Okay? The rest of this is your quotient. I don't like this orange. That's just the top answer. Because quotient starts with a Q, we're going to call it Q of x. And from what we know of polynomials, it always starts with the highest degree and then goes down. So at the very end, that's going to be your number. Then you're going to have your x squared. It should take whatever you had originally, and it should go down by 1. You're going to lose a term. So we're going to have 4x squared, positive 5x, positive 11. Those are your answers. Q of x and R of x. Because it doesn't go evenly. If R of x was 0, that would tell you that it went through evenly, and this would actually end up being a factor. Okay, so long division and synthetic. The better you get at synthetic, the less writing of the steps you need to do. But if you've always struggled in math, then we need to start writing out all the steps. Because if we always do what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always gotten. So if you don't want to get what you've always gotten, you need to change something different.